I knew the moment I opened my front door that Karen was already watching me. Her blind snapped shut so fast the plastic cracked, but not before I caught a glimpse of her squinting eyes, those same judging, laser-focused HOA eyes that had been haunting my mornings for months. She'd been waiting for this moment, and honestly, I'd been waiting too. Because today was the day I stopped playing by her rules, and the day everything in her world began collapsing, starting with a single ignored fine. It all began with a ridiculous citation she taped to my door. HOA violation: grass height exceeds approved community measurements. Yes. According to her little power trip rulebook, my lawn was too tall by 1 inch. She even included photos, bad ones taken from behind a bush, like she was conducting an undercover sting operation. I laughed, crumpled the paper, and tossed it in the trash. That was mistake number 1, according to her. By the afternoon, she marched onto my driveway with her signature neon clipboard, lips pursed like she was holding back the secrets of the universe. "You have 48 hours to pay that fine," she snapped, "or further action will be taken." "Karen," I said, "it's grass, not a federal crime." She jabbed her pen toward me. "The HOA keeps this community civilized. You don't get to ignore the rules." But I did. And I made sure she knew it. The next morning, another citation. This one for my trash cans being too close to the curb. Then a third, claiming my porch light was non-uniform with community lighting standards. She was escalating, testing me, pushing to see how far she could go. So I pushed back harder. I ignored every single one. And that's when she snapped. 2 days later, as I was cleaning out my garage, I heard her voice echoing through the neighborhood like an air raid siren. "Yes, operator, I'd like to report a hostile resident." I stepped outside just in time to see her pacing on her lawn, phone pressed to her ear, waving dramatically at my house as if I were holding the neighborhood hostage. "He's refusing to comply with HOA mandates," she practically screamed. "Yes, it's an emergency." An emergency. Because I didn't mow my lawn. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the real emergency wasn't happening at my house at all. It was happening at hers. And the first domino in her downfall had already tipped. When the police rolled into the neighborhood with their lights flashing, Karen puffed up like she had summoned a personal army. She strutted toward the patrol car with her neon clipboard clutched to her chest, her walk stiff and triumphant, like she'd finally won whatever invisible war she'd been fighting with me. I leaned on my rake, watching from my driveway as she launched into her theatrics. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she began, loud enough for the neighbors to peek through their blinds. "This resident has been refusing to comply with HOA regulations, ignoring fines, and creating an unsafe environment for our community." The officer blinked. "Unsafe, how?" She hesitated. For a second. Then her face twisted. "His grass is excessively overheight. And his trash cans were placed too close to the curb." The silence that followed was so brutal I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The officer looked at me, then at my yard, then back at her. "Ma'am, are you serious?" Karen gasped as if she'd been slapped. "These are violations. The HOA handbook says." "Ma'am," he interrupted, "this isn't a police matter." But he ignored the fine," she insisted, voice cracking with outrage. "You must do something." And then the officer said the line that made Karen's entire world wobble. "Just because you're HOA doesn't mean you're law enforcement." Her jaw dropped. My neighbor's curtains twitched. A few smothered laughs echoed down the street. Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of tomato red. "This community is falling apart," she shrieked. "You need to reprimand him." "Ma'am," the officer said calmly, "this is a civil issue. Legally, it has nothing to do with us. You'll need to handle this within your HOA. Please stop calling 911 for non-emergencies." Karen froze. For a moment, She looked genuinely stunned, like her brain couldn't process a world where she didn't have absolute control. Then her shock boiled into fury. "This isn't over," she hissed at me after the officer left. "You think you can just ignore the rules? You'll regret this." She stomped back to her house, slamming her door so hard it rattled her porch lights. But something interesting happened after that. Karen stopped patrolling the neighborhood. She wasn't outside with her clipboard anymore. She wasn't nitpicking everyone's lawns or measuring mailboxes. It was like she disappeared into her house entirely. At first, I thought she was just embarrassed. But then envelopes started piling up on her porch. Certified mail. Notices. Thick, official-looking documents. Karen wasn't hunting other people's problems anymore. Because suddenly, she had problems of her own. At first, I didn't think much of the envelopes gathering dust on Karen's porch. She'd always kept everything obsessively neat: porch swept, flowers trimmed, mailbox emptied the second the mailman left. So seeing letters pile up like abandoned debris felt wrong. Even stranger, the envelopes weren't the usual HOA paperwork she loved to flaunt. These were heavy, official, sealed with large printed warnings like urgent notice and immediate response required. One morning, while taking out my trash, very far from the curb, just to irritate her, I noticed a bright yellow slip wedged into her screen door. It was larger than the rest. Government-sized. The kind of paper that makes your stomach sink. I glanced around. Nobody else was outside. Curiosity won. I stepped closer, just enough to read the first line printed in bold letters. Final foreclosure warning. I froze. Foreclosure. Karen. The woman who acted like she practically owned the neighborhood. The same person who fined me for a porch light bulb. I stepped back quickly, heart thumping. I didn't want her catching me anywhere near her stuff. But she didn't come out. Not that day. Not the next. For almost a week, she stayed locked inside like a ghost haunting her own house. Then on Thursday morning, shortly after sunrise, I finally saw her. She opened her door slowly, looking nothing like the iron-fisted HOA warrior who lectured half the neighborhood. Her hair was messy, her eyes sunken, and she moved like someone whose entire world was starting to collapse. She bent down, lifted the stack of envelopes, stared at them, then sank onto her porch steps with a thud. I wasn't close enough to see her expression clearly, but her shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. For a moment, I actually felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I heard her mutter, "This can't be happening, they can't do this to me." She ripped open one envelope. Her hands shook. The paper fluttered in the breeze, and her voice cracked with a desperate mix of anger and fear. "No, no, no. I paid that. I thought I paid that." Her voice rose, trembling. "This isn't my fault. They can't foreclose on me. I'm the HOA president, this community needs me." She wasn't talking to anyone. Just unraveling alone on her porch. She slammed the papers down, stormed inside, and a moment later I heard something crash, glass or a frame. Karen was losing control. And it wasn't because of my lawn. It was because she'd been so busy policing everyone else's lives. She'd forgotten to take care of her own. For the next few days, Karen moved like a shadow, quiet, frantic, unpredictable. No more patrols, no more petty HOA warnings, no more clipboard crusades. Instead, she kept darting in and out of her house with stacks of papers, talking on her phone in a rushed, desperate whisper. She wasn't barking orders anymore. She was begging. And the more I innocently went about my day outside, the more pieces of her unraveling situation I overheard, small fragments, but enough to form a picture. And that picture was messy. On Monday morning, as I was hosing down my driveway, her voice suddenly pierced the quiet. "I told you my payment went through. I don't know why it bounced." There was a pause, then she snapped again. No. I can't come up with that kind of money in 30 days. I don't have it. She stepped onto her porch, pacing furiously. When she caught sight of me, she immediately turned her back, but her voice only got louder. I'm the HOA president. What will the board think if they find out? What will the neighbors think? That line told me everything. Her house wasn't just a place she lived. It was her whole identity. Her platform. Her throne. And the foreclosure threat? It wasn't just financial, it was personal humiliation. The kind she wouldn't survive. Over the next few days, she tried to hide it, but she couldn't. Not from the neighborhood. And not from me. On Wednesday, the mailman delivered a thick envelope to her door. Karen practically ripped it out of his hands. He blinked. Are you, all right, ma'am? Yes, she snapped too quickly. Just busy. HOA business. But as soon as he walked away, she tore the envelope open, scanned the papers, and nearly dropped them. She staggered back against the wall, whispering, No, no, this is worse. Later that afternoon, she made what I can only describe as a last-ditch attempt at pretending everything was normal. She marched out onto the sidewalk carrying her famous neon clipboard. The same one she used to terrorize the neighborhood. She stood there, scanning the street with her usual self-important stance. But she didn't write anything down. She didn't knock on anyone's door. She didn't approach me. She just stood there, gripping the clipboard like a life preserver, trying to hold on to the last piece of control she had. Then, as if someone cut the strings holding her up, she turned around and hurried back inside, locking the door behind her. Karen wasn't just drowning in trouble. She was hiding a secret so big. It was about to crush her completely. By Friday morning, the neighborhood grapevine was buzzing. Karen had always been the one spreading rumors, never the subject of them. But now, the whispers were about her. People noticed she hadn't been on patrol. They noticed the frantic phone calls, the mail piling up, the nervous pacing. And most importantly, the HOA board noticed. It started quietly. A few board members drove by her house that afternoon. Not to check lawns. Not to enforce rules. But to figure out why their president had suddenly gone radio silent. They knocked on her door for a long time. Twice. 3 times. No response. But Karen was home, I could hear her inside. She wasn't ignoring them. She was hiding. Later that evening, when the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I stepped outside for some fresh air. That's when I saw them again, 2 board members, Linda and Mr. Hall, standing on Karen's porch, holding a folder thick with documents. They knocked. Firmly. Karen? We need to talk about the notices, Linda called out. There was a long pause, then Karen cracked the door open 2 inches. Now isn't a good time, she muttered. Mr. Hall's voice was sharp. We received a statement from the county. Your property is listed as delinquent. Karen stiffened. It's a mistake. So you've said, Linda replied. But the board can't ignore this, especially when the HOA president herself is facing foreclosure. Karen's voice rose, trembling. Don't you dare lecture me. I've kept this community together. I've enforced every rule. I've done more than any of you. That's exactly the issue, Mr. Hall said calmly. You've been enforcing rules, but not following them. We can't have a president who's financially non-compliant. I swear the entire neighborhood went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Karen yanked the door open wider, eyes blazing. If you think I'm stepping down, you're out of your minds. Linda sighed. No one said step down. But we need transparency. If foreclosure goes through. It won't, Karen snapped. Then the HOA's credibility collapses, Linda finished. Karen slammed the door so violently the windows shook. The board members exchanged a long, heavy look. "We'll have to call an emergency meeting," Linda finally said. "Agreed," Mr. Hall replied. "This can't be ignored." As they walked away, I noticed Karen's curtains twitch. She was watching them. Watching everything slip through her fingers. The woman who once controlled every detail of the neighborhood was now being cornered by her own empire. And soon, the entire neighborhood would learn just how deep her problems really ran. The morning after the board's ultimatum, Karen emerged from her house with a new kind of determination, wild, panicked, and fueled by sheer survival instinct. She wasn't wearing her usual tidy outfit or carrying her neon clipboard. Instead, she clutched a thick binder overflowing with papers, receipts, old HOA minutes, anything she could use to build some sort of defense. She looked like someone preparing for a courtroom battle she knew she was going to lose. She marched straight to her car, but when she got inside, she didn't start it. She just sat there gripping the steering wheel with both hands, breathing fast, staring at her own house like it had betrayed her. Then her phone rang. Her voice carried across the driveway. "I'm telling you, there's been a mistake. My mortgage was supposed to be auto-drafted." A pause. Then, "No, I don't have the funds to make a full reinstatement right now. Can't you stop the foreclosure process?" Another pause. A longer one. I could see her knuckles turning white. "What do you mean it's already filed? You can't just do that without warning." She slammed her hand into the steering wheel, letting out a frustrated, broken sound. Not anger this time, but fear. Real fear. The kind that squeezes your chest until you can barely breathe. For a moment, I almost felt bad again. Almost. She hung up and immediately dialed someone else. "I just need a loan," she whispered harshly. "Just a temporary one. You know I always pay things back. I'm good for it." Silence. Then. "So you're really turning your back on me when I need help?" She pulled the phone away, staring at it like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Her face crumpled, not from rage, but from betrayal. That's when she snapped into motion. Karen jumped out of the car, stormed back into her house, and returned with a stack of HOA documents so thick it looked like half the neighborhood's history. She shuffled through them on her porch, muttering to herself. "If I can prove the fines collected this year, if I can shift the maintenance budget, maybe the board will approve an emergency allocation." It hit me then. Karen wasn't trying to fix the mortgage. She was trying to use HOA funds, community funds, to bail herself out. It was a terrible plan. Illegal. Reckless. Desperate. But desperation pushes people into dark corners. By noon, she'd packed her binder, slammed her car door, and drove off at full speed, heading straight for the HOA office. Karen didn't just want to save her house. She wanted to save her power. And she was willing to cross any line to do it. The HOA rarely held emergency meetings. In fact, the last one had been 7 years ago when a raccoon somehow got into the community pool. But tonight, the room was packed. Neighbors filled every seat, some standing along the back wall, whispering and craning their necks for a glimpse of the woman at the center of all the chaos, Karen. She entered the room clutching her binder like a shield, shoulders tight, eyes darting nervously from face to face. Gone was the commanding posture she usually carried. Instead, she looked like a general who had already lost the war but was still pretending she could turn it around. The board sat at a long folding table in the front. Linda, Mr. Hall, and the treasurer, Mrs. Porter, all looked tense. A microphone rested in the middle of the table, and next to it was a stack of documents with bright red stickers that said "Urgent County Notice." When the chatter finally quieted, Linda tapped the mic. "Thank you for attending," she began. "We're here to address a matter affecting the HOA leadership and, potentially, the integrity of the community." All eyes turned to Karen. She stood abruptly. Before you say anything, let me speak. Her voice was shaky but still fighting for authority. There has been a misunderstanding. My mortgage servicer made an error, and a foreclosure notice was filed prematurely. I am resolving it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Hall cleared his throat. We received documents from the county. They show repeated missed payments over the past year. Karen snapped, because of banking errors. Mrs. Porter adjusted her glasses. We've also discovered discrepancies in HOA fund allocations under your presidency. The room erupted gasps, whispers, tension thick enough to feel. Karen's face reddened. Those allocations were approved. All of them. No, Mrs. Porter said calmly, opening a folder. Some have no signatures. Others were processed without proper board review. Karen slammed her binder on the table. Papers flew everywhere like chaotic confetti. You're trying to paint me as a criminal, she yelled. Everything I've done has been for this community. Someone in the back shouted, what about the constant fines? The harassment? Another voice joined in, you called the police over trash cans. Then another, you made my daughter cry over Christmas decorations. Karen's expression twisted with panic as the room turned on her. This is a witch hunt, she snapped, pointing wildly at the board. You're all conspiring against me because I enforce rules. Linda stood. Karen, we're here because you stopped following them yourself. Silence swept across the room. Karen looked around at the board, at the neighbors she used to intimidate, at the walls closing in on her, and for the first time, she looked truly, completely lost. 2 days after the explosive HOA meeting, the neighborhood felt eerily quiet. People weren't avoiding Karen, they were waiting. Waiting to see what would happen next. And by sunrise on Thursday, the answer arrived in the form of 2 plain white county vehicles rolling slowly down the street. Karen must have heard them too, because within seconds, her front door flew open. She stumbled onto the porch in a rumpled sweater, eyes red, hair unbrushed, gripping a stack of papers like a lifeline. No, she shouted before the officials even stepped out. You can't be here. I filed an appeal. The first officer approached calmly. Ma'am, the appeal was denied. The foreclosure is finalized. Karen shook her head violently. No, it's not. It's pending. You don't understand, this is my house. The second official handed her a document. As of 9:14 a.m. today, ownership has legally transferred to the county. You're required to vacate. Karen's voice cracked into a raw, panicked scream. This isn't fair. I'm the HOA president. I run this community. A few neighbors stepped outside, drawn by the noise. Phones came out. Whispers began. She spun toward the crowd. Are you all just going to watch, she cried. After everything I've done to keep this neighborhood in order. Mrs. Porter shook her head softly. Karen, everything you did was about control, not community. You're all ungrateful, she yelled, tears streaking her face. You let this happen. You want to see me fail. The first officer spoke gently. Ma'am, you need to gather essential belongings. We'll give you a few minutes. Karen ignored him. Instead, she made one last, desperate attempt to salvage what was left. She ran toward the HOA board members standing nearby. You can reverse this, she pleaded, grabbing Linda's sleeve. Use emergency funds, use anything. You have to help me. Linda pulled away. Karen. HOA money can't be used for personal debts. You know that. You owe me. Karen screamed. After all the rules I enforced for you, after everything I fixed, this community should be thanking me. A heavy silence followed. Then Mr. Hall said quietly, Karen, you didn't fix things. You broke people. Something inside her shattered. She let out a choked, Hollow sob, the sound of someone realizing the fight was over. The officials escorted her inside. Minutes later, she emerged carrying one small duffel bag. No clipboard. No binder. No power left to cling to. She paused on her porch, which wasn't hers anymore, and stared at the neighborhood she once ruled with an iron fist. Then, with trembling steps, she walked to her car, and drove away. Karen's reign was over. When Karen's car disappeared down the street, a strange stillness settled over the neighborhood. No one cheered. No one celebrated. It wasn't victory, it was shock. For months, Karen had been this immovable force, dictating lawn heights and mailbox colors like she owned every inch of the community. And now she was gone, leaving behind only the echo of her own collapse. By noon, the officials secured the house. A bright orange notice was posted on the door. Property foreclosed, entry prohibited. People stared as they walked by, whispering. Not with malice, but with disbelief. Without Karen, the neighborhood suddenly felt lighter. Like someone had opened a window after years of stale air. Later that evening, the HOA board called a small follow-up meeting, this time in someone's driveway, casual and quiet. No microphones. No raised voices. Just neighbors sitting in folding chairs talking like human beings. Linda cleared her throat. We all saw what happened today. And we need to make some changes. The HOA worked under Karen's leadership, but it wasn't healthy. For her or for any of us. Mr. Hall nodded. Karen lost everything not because of us, but because she was trying so hard to control everyone else that she didn't control her own life. There were murmurs of agreement. Then Linda looked at me. You were one of the first people she targeted. I'm sorry for what she put you through. I shrugged. Honestly, ignoring her fine might have been the best decision I ever made. That got a laugh, light, genuine. We're dissolving several of her more unreasonable rules, Linda continued. The nitpicking over grass length, trash can placement, porch lights, all of that ends today. People clapped that time. Over the next week, the neighborhood slowly transformed. Kids played outside without Karen popping out of nowhere to lecture them about sidewalk chalk. Neighbors decorated their porches the way they wanted. Forgotten flower beds blossomed again without fear of fines. As for Karen's house, it sat empty for a while, silent, lonely, a monument to what happens when someone cares more about control than community. Eventually, the county listed it for auction. A young family ended up buying it. They painted the shutters blue, planted fresh roses, and filled the porch with toys and laughter. No one missed the neon clipboard. One quiet afternoon, as I trimmed my lawn deliberately an inch higher than her old rules, I thought about Karen. Her reign of strictness, her downfall, her desperate attempts to hold onto power that was already slipping through her fingers. The truth was simple. Karen wasn't defeated by me, or by the HOA board, or even by the foreclosure notice. Karen was defeated by Karen. And the neighborhood finally had peace.